Hello, good evening, everyone. All right, I'll just briefly give you a summary of the presentation. I will start by briefly explaining the principles or the design principles that we use in our design methodology, and then move and use different examples of projects that we've built or designed, and then move on to explaining the High Creative Hub in Jeddah. WAIWAI is the name of our office. We changed the name after 10 years. We had been previously known as IBDA Design. WAIWAI is a Japanese word. It's an onomatopoeia. Actually, it means the sound of a cheering crowd. Whoops. Ibda previously was an Arabic word which meant start. So we moved from actually one language to another language. The design approach principles that I will be explaining one by one through different project references are actually 6. First is the cultural and contextual sensitivities. Second is our interest in phenomena, natural light, activity, wind time, etc. Third is the synthesis between architecture and landscape. Fourth, architecture beyond functionality and program, the folly. Fifth, the diagram of relations, not a diagram of form. And finally, sixth, which is sustainability, constructability, and ecological material sourcing, which is the vernacular future, we call. This name actually was given to the approach that we were working on by Marina Tabassum, a great architect as well, that I'm sure many of you know about. This is a photo of our office in Tokyo. So we have 2 offices. We have an office in Tokyo, and we also have an office in Dubai. I am currently based in Dubai, but I also commute extensively between both offices, as well as all the other projects and construction sites around the world. The pre-COVID era, I was averaging 4 flights a month, more than 50 flights a year. Today, with post-COVID era, everything happens on Zoom. This is the image of the curatorial meeting for the Venice Biennale 2020-2021. So 23 countries are able to share a platform and converse online without the need to get on a flight and spend so much energy and time, and as well as being very harmful to the environment. So first principle that I will discuss and explain is the cultural and contextual sensitivities. This is a photo that I really like. It's a photo of what I call the 20th century architects, the modern architects. So you can see in this photo many well-renowned architects such as Peter Eisenman, Frank Gehry, Rem Koolhaas, Philip Johnson, Arata Isozaki, Zaha Hadid. But what's important to note is that I believe the modern architect selected a common language and homogeneity. They chose to kind of disregard culture and context, except for slight variations. Here you can see they are all wearing almost the same tuxedo, with only Arata Isozaki a slight variation in his bow tie. And these differences are actually what Kenneth Frampton talks about in his book, Critical Regionalism. Well, on the other hand, this is looking deeper into culture and context. I use this photo because I am from Lebanon. I have Japanese partner, lived in Japan 10 years, and currently is based in the UAE. And if we just look several years back, and we look at our mothers, for example, and we see how culture really was so different between each one of us. And then I find it intriguing to see that how homogeneous we have become. And it is very important for us to realize and address these cultural and contextual sensitivities. So this is an image of Al-Warqa Mosque. In our design, we return to the root mosque typology, the Arab hypostyle mosque design. It's a place of worship as well as for community gatherings. The building is built using concrete. Then there is no justifiable reason to use arches other than them being aesthetical. Hence, we proposed 4 different arch sizes, and we proposed parabolic arches onto the building facade. We believe this different sizes creates a playful and inviting facade rather than one that is imposing a certain order on the building. Here you can see a closer look at the different layers within the building. So we have the riwaq that leads into the sahan, and the sahan leads into the haram space. And the pattern wrapping the wall of the riwaq is actually an abstraction of the floral geometry. It's also a relief pattern, meaning it has different depths. So it allows for interplay of light and shadow. And here you can see the image from within the sahan. So you move from the riwaq into the sahan, and that connects directly to the haram space. And the sahan is shaded by 3 plumeria trees. In analogy, this project is Heidi 3 that we built in Dubai Design District. It's constructed using 84 40-foot high cube shipping containers. And they are all recycled containers. Although we use a modular material, a very abstract material, but we get the concept for the laying out of these modules from the local frieze or the local traditional neighborhood typology. So the courtyard, the containers open to courtyards and to sikkas, as well as locating 4 40-foot high cube containers in a vertical direction, as you can see, that naturally ventilate the courtyards as barjils, as wind towers. The next point I move to is our interest in phenomena, our interest in natural light, activity, wind and time, etc. So what is phenomena? Phenomena is a fact or a situation that is observed to exist or happen, especially one whose cause or explanation is in question, such as light. Hence, we study phenomena or light in a lot of detail by building models of very large scale, 1 to 5 within the office, and actually going out into the sun and locating them and orienting them for us to really understand the behavior of natural light within the space and the design impact it will have on the space we want to create. Here you see in Al-Warqa Mosque, that's the view of the haram space within. The intention was to design a homogeneous natural light that changes smoothly with the time of day. All the light you see here is natural lighting. There is no artificial lighting whatsoever. Furthermore, the walls and the corners are curved to eliminate any shadows and keep that kind of very homogeneous light within the space. And I believe this light can only be achieved in a country such as the GCC, where the skies are predominantly clear without much clouds. As well as a photo of the Jamil Art Center, where we designed the facades using pearlescent aluminum panels that change color with the movement of the sun. And here the pearl is also a tribute to the pearling culture of the UAE. But again, you can see how we can interplay with natural light, either within a space or on the facade or building envelope itself. This is another interesting shot of the Jamil Art Center, showing clearly the intended design of the external volumes. Light reflects off the panels, the aluminum panels, and they appear as if they are shoji paper, which is actually in Japan, it's the Japanese semi-translucent paper. This is a mosque we designed in Dubai. We called it the Mosque of Light, where we wanted to further push the boundary of natural light and our obsession with phenomena and designing using natural light. In this project itself, we wanted to actually highlight the internal space and the arches using different arches of different sizes within the space that create a cloud of light within the haram space. The whole building is wrapped actually with a semi-translucent profiled glass. And this is the view from within the haram space. And it is interesting how light changes throughout the day. So the space changes throughout the day. The space is in constant movement with the sun. Hence, this is a rendering at Shuruq time, and this is a rendering at Dhuhr time, and this is Asr time, and then Maghrib time. And you see the transition of the space that is in constant motion with in dialogue with the sun. The third point or design principle that we really use in our design approach is the synthesis between architecture and landscape. That is extremely important to us. So here you can see the pyramid for us is not a monument, but rather a cultural achievement than a monumental achievement. The first recorded building architecture in the world is actually the Pyramid of Djoser. Hence, I'll give an example of this, is the Jumeirah Beach Villa that we designed and built here in Dubai. So here we designed a structure that spans 18 to 24 meters, and it's only possible to have such a structure by using very deep beams, and then we are able to minimize any walls, which then maximizes the relationship with the landscape. Here you can see the depth of the beams that help us create this openness in the building, and the cantilevers that all the walls disappear and just become movable glass panels. Here you can see the cantilevers. All the corners are actually 6.5 meters. So you are cantilevering in all directions by 6.5 meters. And this is only possible by using these very deep beams that also begin to define space and architecture itself. And this is a top view by drone, where you can see the landscape from the ground level goes up to the first level, goes up to the roof, and kind of merges everything into a landscape rather than a strongly defined architectural building. Hence, the synthesis between architecture and landscape is a very key component for us. Another project that shares similarities in this synthesis between architecture and landscape is the Jamil Art Center in Dubai and the Jaddaf Sculpture Park. Here it was important for us to connect the Jamil Art Center to the creek as well as to the sculpture park. We wanted the activity to extend out as much as we wanted it to extend in. So this dual relationship between the in and out. And it was possible to achieve that by wrapping the building with a semi-outdoor colonnade. You can see the colonnade running all around the building. So the colonnade actually invites people in, it draws them in, as well as inviting people from the in to move out. So it creates the seamless connection with the creek and the surrounding site in the building. The fourth principle is the architecture beyond functionality and program, but which we call the folly. What that is actually, a folly, the meaning of folly is an ornamental building with no practical purpose. So it is important for us to have flexibility. Hence, for example, Stonehenge is perceived as a folly. For the Beirut Museum of Modern Art, actually, we proposed a building that in which we wanted to extend the streetscape up through the building onto semi-outdoor terraces. You can see the terraces up here. And these spaces were not actually given in the program, but we believe that such spaces are necessary for the city and for the public program. Hence, the escalators connect from the street level and move people throughout the building onto all these different terraces. And here you can see a perspective of the proposed terrace spaces. And they are all wrapped with ETFE membrane that actually filters the natural light into it. And you have a green wall. So here you can start to see the different principles into being combined into one image. And this is actually a very interesting phenomena in Japanese. It's called komorebi. Komorebi actually means the light filtering through the leaves of trees. So it is, one of our favorite spaces is always sitting under a tree, and the light and shadow that you get, this effect is the light effect that we propose to create on these terraces. The fifth point is actually the diagram of relations, not the diagram of form, and that is very important. I say that because there is a misperception. Sometimes we draw form, but in our case, we're very aware of that when we draw, we are drawing more relationships as much as form, because form is a product of many different studies of different relationships, as well as all these previous principles being combined together. So it is not a starting point, but it is an end point, the form. Hence, this is an initial, what I'm showing you here is an initial concept diagram of Heidi 3, and it shows this design intent that we wanted to create similar to the friche or the local Emirati neighborhood, with the introverted space and the connection on all different levels, and the opening to the courtyard, and the wind tower ventilating the courtyard itself. Again, these are further diagrams that we draw and use as tools in order to enhance the design of the activity within the space. Human activity is as important as architecture. At the end, we design architecture for our comfort and for our activity. So we have to design the activity as much as we design architecture and landscape. And here you can see another photo of Heidi 3 and the intended relation of creating different spaces indoors and outdoors for people to enjoy. You can see a sunken fire pit also. And it is about, bringing people together and creating spaces for interaction. There are also 10 swings that we added into one of the courtyards, and the swings have very large bases that allow people, just like the girl sitting on one of the swings, and she has her water bottle there, her notebook on the swing too. So she can read the book and use the swing as a working station, as well as a space for fun. So this kind of multifunctional approach is very important to having a very successful building design. The sixth point is sustainability, constructability, and ecological material sourcing, the vernacular future. And this is actually the work that we are doing for the UAE Pavilion for the Venice Biennale 2020, postponed now to 2021. So for the first time, actually, and all the other curators that are at the Biennale are there for 2 years and not only 1 year. And this is a photo of actually a sabkha in Liwa. I don't know how many of you know about sabkhas, but they are really natural phenomena within the GCC, the UAE, as much as KSA and Kuwait and the region, as well as all around the world. You have sabkhas in Bolivia, in Australia, and in the USA, and many other countries around the world. And actually, it is interesting to note that the word sabkha is an Arabic word that is adopted into the English dictionary, which means salt flats. Hence, it shows how far they date back into the Arabic world to have an Arabic word defining what they are in the English dictionary. This project is a large collaboration that we are doing with various universities that includes the university, the NYU campus in Abu Dhabi, as well as Tokyo University in Japan. And it is actually an investigation into material and minerals in order to create a sustainable concrete mix that is unlike Portland cement, which is an environmental disaster in fact. But we are not at all using the sabkhas themselves, but we are actually being inspired and learning from the sabkhas. But the material and the minerals, we are getting them from the residual brine of desalinated water, which unfortunately the largest desalinator in the world is KSA, and the second is USA, and the third is the UAE. So we have this tremendous amount of industrial byproduct that we are extracting minerals from in order to create a new cement mix that is eco-friendly and sustainable, and actually absorbs CO2 rather than emits CO2. This is a photo from Star Wars, and actually it's interesting to note that Star Wars has been shot many times, has been filmed on the various sabkha sites. And in this one, you can see even the architecture itself is built from sabkha blocks using an ancient technique called kershif. And this is random photos from the experiment lab that we have at Sirkal that we conduct our experiments from. Just showing you the different researches. And here you can see this, one of the first preliminary experiments that we did is by simply submerging a fabric into the residual brine of desalinated water, and the fabric that only works in tension after a few days starts to work in compression and can then become a temporary structure. I cannot say a permanent structure because this is a soluble structure, but the actual research we are doing is to create permanent structures in soluble concrete mix, not a soluble concrete mix. And now I move, after explaining our design principles and approaches, I'll move to briefly explain High Creative Hub and what we have done for High Creative Hub. But these principles, our principles before, will immediately allow you to understand why we made certain decisions and why the design of the building is in that way. And well, the High Creative Hub is a total of 17,000 square meters, and it includes various programs. It includes art and design galleries, a comedy club, cafe and restaurant, a cinema, which was an international competition and won by Brick Lab, who are currently executing the cinema space within High Creative Hub. And then we also have exhibition and event spaces, artist studios, as well as an Arts Jamil run exhibition gallery space within the whole complex. So I'm sure many of you watching now are familiar with your local architecture and context. So this is an image of a typical traditional urban fabric in the town, could be in KSA or the UAE, in fact. And this is a photo I found on the internet of a market in KSA over 100 years ago. And it shows the gathering of people around, in a square around many shops. And it shows how street life and activity flourishes. And that is important because many months in the season allow for that to happen. And this is an image of Al-Balad in Jeddah, many of you know. Again, the opening of the Sahat, we call them in Arabic, and the Sikka. So this kind of open spaces with the architecture, and the architecture feeds with certain activities to these open spaces. The site is actually 7,653 square meters. It is approximately 87 by 87 meters, but it is slightly skewed. It's also important to note that it is an island site, which means that we have 4 roads all around. So the site addresses four roads in 4 different directions. And these are site photos you can see. It's very important for us before we start designing is to walk on the site, to go to the site, to walk on the site and deeply understand the context and the neighborhood. And as you can see here, the neighborhood is still fairly empty and it doesn't really have direct connections. So I'll be taking you through different case studies and show you the development of the project, which is kind of behind the scenes scenario where you can understand how the project developed to become what it is today. So originally, I call this study set 01, which we were given a BUA of 7,000 square meter to design, consisting of only a one-story building. So in order to do that, we start with quick massing models, usually to understand the ratio of mass to void and what can be created in that sense, and the relationship of the different programs to one another. And here you can see how many different massing models we produce quickly in order to test the site and its, what kind of architecture can come up on the site and understand its potential. So after many studies, we are able to maybe fix our energy onto developing one of the schemes that we find very interesting and pitch that scheme to the client for discussions, knowing that this will definitely need further development and would probably change completely. And we actually kind of enjoy that process as much as the final outcome of the building itself. So here you can see that we actually proposed a building that is consisting of many grains and opens up to different courtyards. So the initial plan that we had proposed, it's consisting of many volumes that open to 6 internal courtyards actually, and 6 courtyards that are addressing the neighboring streets, the streets around the building itself. Here you can see the night shot of the proposal, but it's important to note that the volumes actually adjacent to the street are of lowest height and they cascade up to the middle of the site. So we respect the neighborhood and the height of the neighborhood. One side of the neighborhood has residential villas. And the other sites that are empty, we understand, are zoned as residential areas. So then we kind of kept the height on the periphery as low and then cascades up to the center to become the highest point within the building. And this is a perspective of the entrance lobby we have proposed, and always using these courtyards to bring in natural lights and illuminate these spaces without having any windows that opened out towards the street or the outside, respecting people's privacy in the neighborhood. And these courtyards also become spaces for exhibiting art, not only for sitting and having a coffee or whatever, but also for exhibiting art, or the landscape itself can be an artwork in this case. Then immediately, the client said 7,000 square meter is not enough. We need to study the building at a much larger area. So let's study at 16,000 square meters. So we more than doubled the built up area. So it became very, a quick challenge to us to study that in a 2-story building and how that would work while keeping the same complex program that is composed of many different activities. So we started by these quick massing models. And these massing models show you the relationship of the void to mass. And then hence, we can immediately start to feel that once we push the area up and even increased from 1-story to 2-story, the density of the mass to void is quite severe. Hence, we immediately actually dropped this design approach and started investigating a 3-story building instead of a 2-story building. And then the total allowable height was 16.5 meter, and we believed we could fit 3 stories within the 16.5 meter, and allowing for the exhibition and gallery spaces to have in many places double height ceiling, because art in many cases needs this high ceiling for exhibition. And here again you can see the diagram of relation that we started from. In the plan, we wanted to block the views from the out to in so that we respect the neighborhood and the residences around the site, and introvert. So again, going to the typical planning morphology, urban planning morphology. And at the same time, the stepping of the facade inwards so that it can respect the neighborhood, not to have 16 meters directly onto the side of the road, but rather cascades backwards slowly. So it has this kind of, it looks similar to like a stepping pyramid, and that allowed us to bring in natural light through these offsets actually in the facade. And here you can see the final outcome of how the building sits within the site. And again, as a reminder, the site is located between a residential neighborhood, which is down in the south, and an engineering firm, which is to the right side of the site. And then to the north of the site, we have the new US consulate. And these 2 plots around the site directly are zoned as residential neighborhoods. And then the second plan that we came up with, the initial plan was actually more the pixel plan. But here we proposed a courtyard that extends in from the street, from the main street, which is actually to the south, because that is the widest road, or the main street. And that extends from the street into the building, which is drawing in the public into the building, and then having the art galleries, exhibition spaces, and the cinema opening up to that courtyard. And then on the first level and the other level, having the galleries continue with the offices and entrepreneurial spaces and other exhibition spaces, of course. And then the terrace also terracing up, so that there's always this relationship from the in to the out to the courtyard. So the courtyard kind of terraces upwards to the building. And then on the third floor, mostly it is artist studios with a restaurant, and the rest is space for MEP equipment. And this was the other attempt at creating a facade design. But then here you can see we immediately realized that it is probably a much better approach to not have the courtyard directly connect to the street, but have two siccas that connect from the street to the courtyard to give the courtyard more privacy, as well as to allow more natural light from the south into the courtyard. So these were two factors that allowed us to change that decision, and from continuing that homogeneous look on the facade and breaking it further up into a kind of a standalone volume in that area. And here you can see these are the final plans of the building. And the project has a fully sunken basement, semi-sunken basement, because the ground floor level is at plus 1.6 above the ground level. And then the ground level here, you can see is connected by two siccaways from the street to the courtyard itself. And then again, this is the ground floor. And then the first floor is connected by many staircases that lead up to the terrace. You will see them in the photos. I won't go into details of planning. And this is, again, a more detailed model that we used to investigate the design further. And here, this is, yes.
Yes, so we are up on time. I need to ask you a question, if you don't mind.
Yes.
Okay, I'll ask the question. So we get a question from our guests. How do we convince our clients, society that have been perpetually bombarded by Western standards of beauty and aesthetic, that our land and culture is beautiful and should be celebrated? And continuing, how do we maximize our natural resources to express the nuances of Arab culture and society?
How do we do that? I mean, each architect has his own approach, I believe, in expressing and reinterpreting. But I think, you know, in the 21st century, we should not copy paste. We should learn from our ancestors, and we should, you know, develop things in using the technology we have today. We cannot disregard that technology of our time, and reinterpret things and put them to better use. You know, 20th century mathematics is very different from 21st century mathematics. So then even in, I believe, for example, in Al-Warqa Mosque, the abstraction of the floral pattern on the GRC that wraps the haram space or the minaret, it was an intentional decision for us not to use an existing geometrical pattern, but rather, you know, learn from those patterns and try to create something that is more unique in its sense. I hope that answers the question.
I'll finish, but before I finish, someone is asking, they are so curious,
yes,
about your time in Japan, but we can talk about it later. Do you speak Japanese?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so he speaks Japanese. Thank you very much, sir.
You're welcome.
Glad to have you here. Have a good night.
Thank you.